Welcome everybody to Chaps Many Cultures for this wonderful Friday. How are you today, wherever you are in the world? Well, it might be said that when we're dealing with cultures, there are two sides to each coin. Yeah, might be a little bit more complicated than that. But when you've got two people that come to a problem from both sides of a different style, who should adapt to who? Who should bridge the gap first? Who should make the first move? Kind of like in a romance, right? Or a dance. Who should lead? We're going to talk about that in this episode. Stick around. Yet another day. The saying we haven't used for a while is that too much culture is never enough. That's the one.
There we go. Too much culture is never enough.
Too much culture is never enough.
Welcome, everybody. Episode 115, Two Chaps, Many Cultures, the program about the business of culture and as well the culture of business and how culture affects your business. As my banner says here in the background, maybe I can twist my camera just far enough. Here we go. If you don't get culture, culture will get you. That's right. Okay. Happy Friday, everybody.
Sharp teeth. How are you today, mate?
I'm splendid, and I'm curious how everybody else is. Let us know where in the world you're dialing in from, where you're watching this. Use the comment box below, say hello, or say it in the language that you prefer. We take it all. We may not understand it all, but we'll accept it all. So bring it.
That's a good idea. Yeah, get everybody just to write their questions in their native language and see if we can work out what it is.
That would be awesome. That would be a long episode with windows switching between Google Translate.
Google Translate, yeah.
Do it. Let's bring it.
Absolutely. But we would be willing to bridge the gap with you. We would do that for you. We would come your way. We would think about, maybe you're only comfortable in your native language. So we would do our little bit by our Google Translate. But so
we would certainly do that.
And is that the right thing to do? Is that what we should be determined to do?
I don't know, especially if you're using an automated translator, that may backfire. And I'm very cautious how I use it now in the virtual world specifically. Yeah. I caught myself doing it yesterday, and I stopped myself in my tracks and questioned myself, should I be doing this or not? So I delivered a webinar that was seen in many parts of the world, and there's apparently a strong contingent from Nigeria who was attending the webinar, and I got some LinkedIn notifications afterwards. And I'm the kind of guy, when you contact me on the socials, I check you out. I look at your profile and want to know a little bit about you before I respond, so it's not generic. And this one lady from Lagos, she was apparently Nigerian, and knowing a little bit about Nigeria, I didn't want to presume that she was this or that. So I checked out her name, ran it through Google, and found out, is she Igbo? Is she Yoruba? Is she Hausa? What type of ethnicity or language might she be speaking? And in Nigeria, the easy thing is you can run the names and it will give you a quick indicator, right? So my cultural intelligence piece kicked in. So I found out she was Yoruba, and I thought, okay, Google Translate, can you help me here? And maybe I can say a little phrase in Yoruba that would build a bridge or break down a communication barrier and make a nice entree, right? And that's when I realized, dude, you have no idea of Yoruba language, and you have no idea how accurate Google Translate is. What are you doing? Is this going to backfire, or is this going to be a good thing? So I ran several phrases, right? I thought this could be a good one. And out come these symbols and letters with dots and accents and little pigtails that I didn't know, because I don't know Yoruba language, right? So like, oh, this could be so wrong in so many ways. So what am I going to do? So I picked the simplest phrase possible that was as innocent as possible, or where I thought my potential for failure was lowest, and I used that. And sure enough, it worked, right? So I was able to build a small portion. I laid one brick of a bridge, right?
Right.
But that can be a tightrope walk, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had a funny similar experience this week with a group program online, and I saw somebody pop up with an Indian name from Australia, but they're from, they're in Australia, and I immediately started to say, oh, welcome, to this person. And I said, well, this is great that we've got you here, because, hopefully you can confirm or, push back on the how we're talking about the culture and that kind of stuff. And but I didn't give the gentleman a chance to speak yet. I just said that, and I said, by the way, how are you? And he went, I'm good, mate. How are you? I said, I was actually born in Sydney, down the road from where you're from. And so the understanding was that he had been born and bred in Australia, and he really framed his business acumen from the Australian point of view. So he said, well, I could probably talk about it in the family sense, having been raised by an Indian family. So I was trying to bridge, and I probably bridged too far to something that I didn't really need to bridge. So I think that the question is here, when it comes to who should adapt to who, just like we talked about yesterday with the tools, we can use some of these tools to at least establish at what degree are people comfortable in at least identifying their own kind of preferred style, and then work together with their colleagues to say that, well, really, should we adapt to each other? Isn't there the richness in the difference and the perspectives that we bring from a business point of view?
And that is, I think, one of the challenges, or I don't know if it's challenge, but it's one of the hiccups you would experience in global work, whether it's pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, during pandemic times. There are certain behavioral norms that you have for yourself. You have your behavioral defaults. That's how you would like to do things. And then there are ways that other people communicate. And if you've been doing this before, then you have learned a little bit about the other culture. So you proactively adjust your behavior, and you might find the other side doing the very same thing to you, and you're still not matching up there. Some of you may be familiar with this cartoon. It's been around for years, right? So I'm pulling this up here. This kiss, bow, shake hands. How do you respond, right? Well, what is it you do? Do you lean in? Do you lean back? Do you give a hand? Do you fold your hands? How many times or how many ways can you interact or start an interaction? And I couldn't find the other image. There's this image of a Westerner bowing to a Japanese person, and the Japanese person extending their hand. Like, both are trying to adjust to each other, and yet they're still not matching. So who adjusts, right? That's the question. Who does the work? What do you think?
Yeah.
Is there a simple answer to that?
Well, I don't think there is, and that's the difficulty. Well, it's the beauty, I think. It's not difficulty. I think it's the beauty of it. At least when we're trying to understand, if you've got somebody who has, we work with clients that call themselves already chameleons. They may have had experience working with many different cultures.
Right.
And when they do respond to any kind of assessment tool, and we do the debrief, they say, well, when I was answering the questions, I found myself saying, well, it depends. Yeah. I've been in situations with German people, but I've also been in situations with Japanese people where I've seen these two degrees of different interaction styles. And I found myself realizing I have to kind of adapt. So being in those situations have allowed them to be situationally aware of where they are at that point. So you might come across somebody who has those skills, yeah, and they are mirroring what you're doing, and it initially might make you feel comfortable. But I do think that you've got to give people then the grace to push back against them and say, hey, no, I realize what you're trying to do is help me and adapt to me, but I don't want you to lose your identity. And that's the other thing about, you know, the clients that say, so you're saying that now that I'm moving to this country where some of their styles will in general be opposite to what I'm comfortable with, do I have to lose who I am? Do I have to change who I am and be completely a different person?
Yeah.
And that's a difficult thing to do.
That's I think one of the old paradigms that were that was perpetuated for generations. This "when in Rome, do as the Romans do," and quite frankly, I call BS, because that is nonsense. Unless you are Roman, you won't be doing as the Romans do, because you're not Roman. Period. Right. So you can adjust to a degree, but unless you get fully immersed, that's going to be really hard. I just want to give a quick shout out to one of our viewers here who's viewing from Germany, Markus Langfritz. Servus, Fritz. I haven't heard from him in years. You know, went to college together. Man, it's been
wow.
Servus, Fritz. That's awesome. So I often use a rubber band with our clients, right? So I just happen to have one here right now, coincidentally.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
So our behaviors are like muscles. We can stretch them to a certain degree, right? You can be a little bit more direct here or a little bit more indirect there in communication. And we don't communicate just one way. We have a certain bandwidth. We have what Andy Molinsky calls a zone of appropriate behavior, right? And that zone can be expanded over time with practice, with learning, with trying out new things and see if they work, how they work. Mm-hmm. And if we're trying to stretch it too far, I'm not going to do this because A, it hurts and I want to reuse that rubber band, it will snap, right? So you don't want to lose yourself in that process of adaptation and adjustment.
And one area where you can practice this first, because it's not real time and you can take your time in doing this, is actually email. You know, if you're communicating with somebody on an email, and I find myself having to check myself when I'm writing an email, because I can tend to write quite flowery emails because I'm trying to give a lot of context, and I'm constantly self-editing myself because I'm aware of that tendency of mine to do so. But we spoke to Ted yesterday, and I'm somebody who interacts with Ted fairly regularly on an email, and I've found myself that because you saw in his profile, he's very task orientated. So my writing an email to someone like that, I can practice this style in terms of saying, well, this is how I think that they would like it in the written style, but then I should also think about that when I'm talking to them. And
that's where cultural intelligence meets emotional intelligence, right? Where you have developed the ability to detect somebody's personality and communication preferences. They may be in line with what you know about the culture that this person's from. They may not. They may actually be an outlier within their own culture. And you can, if your senses, if your observational skills, if your calibration skills are fine-tuned, you will pick up whether somebody is communicating more kinesthetically or visually, auditorily, and as we say in NLP terms, or if they tend to be more straightforward communicators, or as Brett said, more flowery between the lines. You can pick this up from their social media profile. You can pick this up from the emails that you receive, and you go through the email and take a closer look. What type of words is that person using? Mm-hmm. And you can adjust to that in mirroring that language or that communication mode, and thereby building rapport. Now, some might argue, and I'm going to be completely honest, when we picked that topic for today, it was a little bit inspired by a fellow interculturalist who posted this on her LinkedIn earlier this week. Kasia Lanucha, I'm hoping I'm saying her name right. She posted that very question, who adapts to whom? And there was a series of comments underneath that. And some people were making the point that, well, who are you selling to, right? The person who is trying to get a commitment from somebody else needs to adapt. That was the answer, right? If you're trying to make a deal, if you're trying to be successful in business, then the obligation is on you to adjust to your potential buyer's behavior. That would be one way of looking at it. And I'm not going to say that is wrong. I would simply invite you to say maybe there are other ways of looking at it. But there's this, one of the people commenting on this thread used, and he's a Brit, by the way, who used this comment by former German Chancellor Willy Brandt, who was the head of the German government in the, I want to say, the 1970s. And I'm going to pull up his quote here. He said, "If I'm selling to you, I speak your language. But if I'm buying, dann müssen Sie Deutsch sprechen." Which means then you must speak German. Yeah. Only if you want me to buy from you, then you will adjust to me, right? So that's basically encapsulates in this one phrase the sentiment of whoever's trying to get a buy-in from a potential customer is the person that should be doing the cultural adjustment. Is it always that clean cut, Brett?
I don't think so. Well, it's almost impossible. I mean, I think that as somebody with a retail background, I would love to think that all my staff would have the ability to assess very quickly the cultural background of the person you're talking to, and then adjust behavior, not just to sell, not just that it is obviously got the end goal is to do business and do the transaction, but also just to make the client feel welcome and included in the process. And, you know, having just gone through the process of buying a car, which has been like pulling teeth for everybody, the second biggest.
Yeah, I want to hear about that now.
Right. But it was just, you know, I found myself wanting to make notes after every dealership I left on the different styles of the approach. And they were really from a, you know, so vast and varied. And you could tell from maybe the perceived cultural background of the salesperson exactly why they were using the approach that they used. And I still think I did keep some notes, and I still think it'd be an interesting piece to write. But at the end of the day, it didn't really matter about how we were. It had nothing to do with how we were. There's a lot of training that goes into sales processes. It is meant to, or it's meant to give the impression that they're interested in you, to try and say, now, what do you want to use this product for? What is the intention? How much is your budget? That kind of thing. But all of it is just driven as the transaction. But I think we forget sometimes that there are real people and flesh and blood beneath the thought processes, and perhaps just a little bit of training in that area would be good, right?
I would agree. However, I'm going to pick up on that quote again. I don't necessarily have to speak the person's language or be fluent in my potential buyer's culture in order to make that sale. Right. So I can acknowledge that I'm not fluent in that other person's culture, and buy me some grace by acknowledging that. So I think the killer application is not to be culturally fluent in all the potential cultures you're interacting with. I think the killer application is having the humility and the vulnerability to admit that you're not. Yeah. And I think if we're able to say, hey, I don't know enough about your language, about your culture, about how you would like to be treated or how you would like to be sold in this scenario, how you wish to buy, much rather, because let's face it, nobody really likes to be sold. You want to know what are the reasons why people are buying from you, or and I'm not saying buying a product, why they are buying into you, why they would like to listen to your point of view, your argument, your idea, your concept. So if I have the humility and the vulnerability to admit that I don't know enough about how you would like to do that, so can we talk about this? Maybe we can find some common ground here. What would you like to see in this? Here's how I would like to do this. Is there a potential way to match this up? Maybe I can stretch a little bit and you stretch a little bit, and then we meet in the middle, perhaps, right?
Yeah, win-win, the old-fashioned win-win scenario, right?
Yeah, but then you go into, I mean, you and I, we both deal a lot with expatriates who are sent into other cultures to take on a position, oftentimes a position of leadership, where their expertise is desperately needed in that foreign location. So can the expatriate always expect that their team on the ground will adjust to them as well. That may be an expectation, but will it always be met? So that's what I tell our expatriate clients is, that's fine to have that expectation. Be prepared to be disappointed. So if you're not in control of other people's behavior, you're only in control of your own behavior. So if you want to take that step, if you're willing to adjust your behavior, you might see it being reciprocated. You may not.
Yeah.
Be okay with it.
Yeah, and I think I find myself saying this all the time, that understand that we mentioned this yesterday, and we've always mentioned it, that the process of our work is getting people to understand and dig into their profile first, their tendencies first. Well, of course, if we're doing that with the client and they're aware of that and they go, that's great, I'm going to this place, and we're now aware of maybe the tendencies of the people we're going to work with. But unfortunately, we don't have access to the people that are receiving them. Yeah. This is the missing link, I guess, in some aspects of the work we do, is that we're not really looking at it from a binary sense. The receiving parties, and this goes to onboarding expats when they arrive, are just living in their fishbowl, and they don't even realize that there's water. So they're just, they're assuming perhaps maybe that they're in their home country, they are comfortable in the way they work, and that is the way they're going to do it. I think it'd be great if we could have some access, at least, or provide through, whether it's the tools that we use to offer those to the receiving parties, to say, well, maybe just at the start, at least, we consider that this person coming in as a leader, whether it be direct or functional leader, we actually think, well, okay, what can we learn from them, or how can we mirror there to make them feel comfortable when they arrive?
So there is no simple answer to the question, who adapts to whom, right? So I think the key strength that you can have in any global context is to be flexible in those situations and be prepared to do the adjustment on yourself, and don't expect your environment to do the same. As I said, humility, vulnerability, and also give people grace. Give yourself the grace. Forgive yourself for not always being able to stretch yourself far enough, right? And forgive others if they're not doing it at all, or if they're maybe not able to. I think the worst thing we could do is in such situation. That's a tongue twister. In situations like that was easier. Yeah. Is to cast judgment or to point blame, and that easily derails those relationships and those business contexts. People don't act out of a negative intention. People always have a positive intent in mind when they do the things they do. So It would behoove us to be good detectives and finding out what might be the intention behind the behavior that I find a little irritating or that I don't understand just yet.
Yeah. I think at a final point at the end of a program this week in this group program is that a lady put her hand up and said, I've just got one question. And in this case, I had worked with their colleagues on the other culture, and she said, you've worked with the other colleagues. Give us some idea on, tell us how they feel, I became that bridge between maybe the difficulty of them to ask directly. I became the bridge to say, can you share to whatever level you're comfortable with, without, divulging individual attitudes and privacy aspects, but can you divulge to us in general? What is the mindset? What do they think of us? And can we kind of use that as a starting point as well as we move forward in these collaborations? And I thought that was a really like, to your point, being humble, being curious, and saying, I don't know it all, and I really want to know from these other people, what do they expect from us? What can we do to make them feel welcome, make them feel included? And I thought that was a really a great end to that program, because everybody said, yeah, well, that was really the important question. After all the bloviating I'd done and the expertise I'd sprinkled on them, it really just came down to them honestly wanting to know the heart of the people they're working with. And I thought that was great. Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. Happy Friday, everybody, or Saturday if you're watching this on the other side of the globe. Just a quick reminder, we did an episode on Wednesday on how to deal with very blunt feedback with a behavioral style that not everybody's comfortable with. So if you missed that, go back on YouTube or on all of our other channels and go back to the archives, watch the Wednesday episode. We produced a little worksheet around that. So our Two Chaps Mini Cultures how-to worksheet, right? That's the cryptic link here. TCMC, Two Chaps Mini Cultures _ how -2. That's where you find the worksheet on handling blunt feedback. And talking about blunt feedback, if you're doing work with German speakers, you might encounter blunt feedback here and there. As Brett will tell you, that he has endured some of my blunt feedback once in a while. So
I've got the broccoli out of my teeth now, right?
So we'll do a 2-part training, a 3-hour training next week. So we still have a few seats available. It's called Doing Business with Germany, 3-hour live training, Tuesday and Thursday next week. That's February 9th and 11th, as you can see here. And if that is something that interests you, go to this link. I can post it in the chat box as well, but go to that link, write it down. It's not that hard, right? Email me. DM me. We got multiple ways to do that, right? So Doing Business with Germany, we got that training coming up next week. It's 2 times 90 minutes. It's not going to pull you away from your work too long. So we'd love to have you, and maybe you know somebody who could benefit from that.
Absolutely. It'll be good fun. It always is, with my good friend.
Because if you want me to buy, dann müssen Sie Deutsch sprechen. Nah.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aha.
Uh-huh. So what's up for the weekend, Mr. Brett?
Oh, playing around in snow, which we have the abundance of in this weekend. It's really beautiful out there. And it's a beautiful sunny day here. It's just gorgeous out there. It makes you feel like you want to go out, except it's about minus 15 degrees Celsius. So it's
which is in Fahrenheit for our North American viewers.
Oh yeah, so we're getting down to the high teens, I think, somewhere around that. It's as they say in the old dart, jolly old England, it ain't half parky outside. So
what?
It ain't half parky, which is a little term that I learnt from my English compatriots early on in my career. It ain't half parky. I think it's quite quaint, and I don't even.
It's bloody cold. That's what it means.
Yes, it is colder than I could say a couple of different things as cold, but it's cold. It's cold. Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, that's great.
All right. You'll have a wonderful weekend. This was episode 150. 2 Chaps Mini Cultures. We hit another mile marker, I would argue. So stay tuned for some reorganizing of our content, and we will see you again soon. Watch the archives. Go back to the episode that you like best. Let us know which episodes really resonated with you, what you learned, what some of your feedback would be. We're open to all this. You see the contact information for us down here below. If you feel so inclined, give it a like, give it a subscribe on our YouTube channels, share it with your friends and your colleagues. We're social.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Get social.
All right, everybody. You have a wonderful weekend. This is Two Chaps Mini Cultures, and we're out for now.
Talk to you soon.